just 47 years ago now that I left my home in Duluth, Minnesota, and my job as assistant coordinator of student activities at the University of Minnesota Duluth to take up my studies at the University of Chicago Graduate School and Meadville Lombard, the Unitarian Universalist Seminary there. At that time, you were matriculated at both schools. And I had thought about this for a long time and finally made the decision to go. And I remember one of the first things was an orientation time at the university, which involved an opening service. And the dean of the divinity school at the university, Dean Kitagawa, gave a sermon on beginnings. And a sermon which I still remember 47 years later. Isn't that amazing how a sermon can stay with you? But Dean Kitagawa went through in the history of religions the whole issue of beginnings, and he referred to Abraham and Moses, and Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha, how the beginning of their ministries was not an unalloyed time of joy and blessing. There was keen anticipation, but there also was controversy and anxiety and concern, sense of loss for what was being left behind. And he encouraged all of us to work through some of these issues we might be dealing with about beginnings and stick with it as we begin our ministries. And you know, that was such an important sermon for me because I was dealing with some pretty difficult issues personally at that time. I was grief-stricken because I had left my friends in Minnesota. I had left a job which I had loved. I had doubts. Did I make the right decision? I had enjoyed my job there and at the university, and I was in line for possible better jobs. And I could have stayed and studied for my doctorate and had that pretty much paid for. Had I made the right decision for this unknown vocation? And then I felt a good deal of guilt. I was leaving my evangelical Christian background to study at a heretic institution, Unitarian Universalism. My father, when he found out that I was going in this direction, quoted a Bible verse to me I'd never heard before, that I was a dog returning to its vomit. And an uncle, when he found out, said, Paul, I can see choosing your own way in terms of denominations, but Unitarian Universalism, that's pretty far out. And people at my home church wondered what's happened to Paul because he lost his faith. And I began to wonder what is wrong with me? Going way back to my great grandfather, who was one of the founders of our denomination. They've had this belief in the core doctrines of Christianity, the deity of Jesus, the inerrancy of the Bible, the doctrine of eternal hell and eternal salvation, and an all-powerful, all-loving God. Why can't I accept this? So I was feeling guilt. So that was a very, very helpful sermon to me because I realized that it was natural at this beginning for me to feel these things, and that others felt this way as well. And it encouraged a dialogue with a fellow student at Meadville who had just left the Roman Catholic tradition and 2 years at a Catholic seminary to become a UU minister. And so we kind of help each other through this time of real problems at this beginning for both of us. But I followed Dean Kitagawa's suggestion and stuck it out. And that beginning 47 years ago became the signal choice and the signal commitment of my life, which has led to a wonderful career and a real sense of satisfaction that I've been doing what I should be doing, what I was meant to be doing. Blanche shared a portion of that wonderful poem by John O'Donohue, For a New Beginning, which really encapsulates my experience 47 years ago and also sheds really information about my experience and all of the new beginnings I've had in years since. I'm going to start a little bit closer to the beginning of that poem and share it for you. This beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled and you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. And I love these words, unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back, learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. You know, these basic sentiments have guided me through all of the changes and all of the beginnings in my life since. It's stayed with me in a very, very important way, to working with 7 different congregations, and of course, my marriage to Carol and the birth of our 2 kids. I remember when our son David was born after some complications of the birth, and I told rather exuberantly my ministerial colleague about this, and he said, Paul, your life will never, ever again be the same. And of course, it wasn't, in terms of the challenges of a new beginning, of sleepless nights, but ultimately, the wonder and the grace and the beauty of watching children's lives unfold. But yet, all of these changes that I've had, all these new beginnings, have involved challenges. They have involved difficulties. Several years ago, I took a course with Alban Institute, that church think tank, about ministerial startups. And their starting point was that the unnamed elephant in the room is grief. You know, I just left a congregation a few weeks ago, and I am grieving the loss of that relationship. I'm grieving the loss of the sacred space that I grew to appreciate and love. And that's part of me. Very likely, there are all of you are grieving the loss of a minister or ministers who you have come to love and appreciate in the past. And that's one of the difficulties that we have to work through. I am not one of your prior ministers. You are not one of my prior congregations. I trust that all of us shall honor and preserve in our memories that which has been good about our past relationships. I also trust that we'll be free to relinquish the claim of the past upon us as we move into the future in terms of a new beginning. You know, the strangeness of my face and voice is a temporary condition. Even now, as you see and hear me, I am moving from anonymity to personhood. And in the tomorrows to come, we shall share many, many different experiences where we will come to discover who we are in this new relationship. And I particularly appreciate those who have joined me for these get-together Zoom conversations where I can hear your stories and you can tell me of your hopes for our congregation's future. And I hope that some of you will sign up for these additionally. I'll do as many as there are folks who want to take part, because I think it's important for me to get to know you, to get to know your stories, and for you to get to know mine. Now, another difficult thing about beginning is found in our reading by Chaim Potok. You know, where he's told, you cannot swallow all the world at one time. In other words, you've got to take it slowly in terms of coming to an understanding. You know, part of me wants to say right away, well, I want to know what this congregation really needs and get going on what we can do to provide the best future for ourselves and our community that we can possibly provide. But that doesn't quite work that way, does it? We have to give it time to look at the possibilities and to consider them and to discern what the future should be. And I and the board will be working with a consultant and working on goals for the future. But we have to use what's called, I think, Shoshin from the Buddhist tradition, which means a beginner's mind, an attitude of openness, eagerness, and a lack of preconceptions. I can say to myself, well, you know, I've been to 7 other congregations, actually 8 if you count my internship, and it's so easy to try to extrapolate from previous experiences to what's needed. But a beginner's mind involves taking a deep breath to fully experience a new situation without the internal chatter of our brains trying to label our experience and compare it to previous ones. We all require, in this new relationship, beginner minds. So I look forward to this next chapter in your lives and in my life as we begin together. Now, I think it's important, of course, to be open to new possibilities and new understandings because every congregation is different. I know our firstborn, David, boy, I'll tell you, we had a lot of sleepless nights. He didn't sleep through the night. And when our daughter, Kristen, was born, I was expecting that same thing. But you know, she slept through the first night and almost all the time. And she was so much easier as an infant than our son had been. You can't extrapolate from one new situation to others. But despite the beginner's mind and being open to new possibilities, I think it's always important to consider our core commitments, which aren't really liable to change that much. I'm very impressed with Jack Mendelsohn's story along this line, which I heard many, many years ago. Jack now has passed on, but he was one of the first UU ministers that I really got to know. But he told the story of a sea captain who before beginning every voyage, would go down to his cabin and he would take a box off his shelf and put it on his desk, and he would open it up, take out a piece of paper, read that piece of paper, put it back in the box, put the box back up on the shelf, and then go on deck and say that it was time to weigh the anchor. And so many of the sailors, what is he doing when he takes that box down and reads that piece of paper? Some had seen him do that so many times. And when the sea captain died, one of the things that they did right away was to go back to his cabin and to look in that box, put it down on the desk and to take out that piece of paper and to read it. And you know what it said? It said starboard right, port left. Starboard right, port left. That is going back to the absolute basics, isn't it? Every time that he left port on a new journey. Jack Mendelsohn suggested to all of us that in our new beginnings as ministers, we are aware of those core commitments, which are not liable to change that dramatically over time. So what would be in your box if you were to take it down and look at it as we begin our journey together? Well, I would say the good old golden rule would be there. That's found in at least 20 to 25 of the world's religions in different forms. doing unto others as we would have done unto us, expressed in many different ways. That would be in my box. Certainly, we have our personal poems, our personal statements of commitments that are meaningful to us. I particularly like the salutation to the dawn coming out of the Hindu tradition. And I often say it every day, with its implication that every day is a new beginning. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, and the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. That would be in my box. You know what else would be in my box? Our purposes and principles as Unitarian Universalists, which I have come to appreciate and love so much, and I think provide a real basis for our community and our efforts together as we begin. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. These have stood the test of time, not only within Unitarian Universalism, but I think they have stood the test of time in terms of a proper understanding of human history in general. So I want to share with you again some of the words from that wonderful poem, which I shared with you earlier, as really sort of an encapsulation of what this new beginning can mean to us. We can trust the promise of this opening. We can unfurl ourselves into the grace of beginning. We can awaken our spirit to adventure. We can hold nothing back and learn to find some ease and some risk. And soon, I believe, we will find ourselves at home in a new rhythm as we begin together. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being with you and working with you for the coming year. I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. So may it be. Amen.